the book that I wrote called God, Drugs, and Society. Um, it's for the past 13 years, I've been working with, dual diagnosed clients, both mental health and substance abuse. And it has given me the experience and the knowledge to, to know what's really going on, in the individual from a practical standpoint. My master's is in sociology, but in mental health, there are two different things. So I learned that, there are three main reasons, that people will use or may have either an emotional breakdown or a psychological breakdown. One, it could be personal, the other one could be interpersonal, and the third one is environmental. So those three issues can produce a maladaptive behavior, in an individual, specifically with substance abuse. I am at the end, the last one, which is the environmental. Substance abuse, it's caused, like I said, by psychological, emotional problems, but it's also produced by social factors, and they're both kind of married. They're both intertwined together. You can't separate them. So when I have the one-on-ones that I've done with clients, I also done group sessions as well. We always talk about both the emotional, the psychological, and the social. The spiritual, it's a different kind of treatment, which is not commonly offered, in our, secular treatment facilities. Obviously because of religion and tolerance and all that nature. But spirituality also plays a major role in both in addiction and recovery. Believe it or not, there is a connection between spirituality and the drugs. There both are. And in the book, I explain, how those two things work together. If you look at for example, in 1960, we had the drug revolution, right? The counterculture of the drug revolution, where it was pretty much about LSD, PCP, and it was about individuals, especially young men and women, that were somewhat disassociated from society, and they found kind of rescue in LSD, in the drug. And the guru of the revolution of the 60s, which was, I'm awful with names, so forgive me. I forgot his name. His view was that LSD was the new religion of society. So drugs has a lot to do with the way people see reality, the way they perceive reality, the way they want to approach reality. The counterculture of the 60s, what they wanted to do is just change society, change the way they think, that change the way they view things, change the Protestant religious values that were pretty much, guiding the thoughts and the conscience of our society. So they saw a way out, and LSD was somewhat of this kind of altered consciousness that helped them see like a new reality. So there is a connection between, again, spirituality. Social factors definitely has a lot to do with how people view, and give meaning to the drugs. We all do things because we find meaning in it. Not because we decide to say, okay, I just want to do this today because, I don't know, I'm just having, I don't know, just a good thought today, or bad hair today. We give meaning to everything we do. So people find meaning in drugs. It provides in euphoria. It provides happiness. It helps them be who they want to be. That's another thing. That when we talk about drugs, especially narcotics, opiates, which is heroin, methamphetamine, cocaine, they produce this euphoria which it allows the individual, to do the things that are somewhat shameful, by society. A lot of for example, let me give you an example. One of my clients told me that when he smoked crack, it allowed him to be himself. I mean, he broke down every barrier, every norm that were given to him as a child. He said that every time he got together with his buddies and they smoked crack, they did things that it's hard to imagine. I mean, sex with each other, steal, I mean, you name it. It broke down the barriers, the norms, and values that they felt that it was hindering their view of life. So it's an escape. It's a new religion. This is why it's so difficult to get rid of it. I mean, the fight against drugs, it is a fight against the self. Because drugs are there to produce pleasure. They're not there, that's it, that's what they do. Somebody goes through some kind of post-traumatic stress disorder as a child, grows up, and the dopamine, which is the chemical that produces pleasure, in the central nervous system, obviously gets suppressed. And that's because some kind of post-traumatic stress disorder in the past. It could be physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, verbal abuse, and there's just not enough pleasure there. And unfortunately, it does impact, that chemical in the brain, that produces pleasure. This is why it's so easy for somebody who has gone through all those things to start using drugs, because the drugs kind of produces the pleasure that their body naturally can't produce. Now the problem with that is that it not only it gives them pleasure, but it gives them 6 times more pleasure than what they need. And the more they need, the more they use, the more the body builds a tolerance, to the drug. And all of a sudden, somebody's doing pot, and maybe a year or two later, they're graduated to cocaine. Maybe a year later, they'll graduate to heroin. Then they'll start doing 1 bag of heroin, 2 bags of heroin, 3 bags of heroin. Before they know it, they're doing 20 bags. Now, at that time, they're stealing, they're robbing, they're doing whatever it takes to buy the drugs. The problem today is that, Richard Nixon started a war back in '73, war against drugs, and that today it's just still as more powerful and more vibrant as ever. Unfortunately, people give different perception what the drug is. I mean, it's not, unfortunately, it's not a drug about facts. It's a drug about perception. What does drug mean to somebody? If you go to the inner city, drugs to them mean survival. It's survival. It's just a way of life, making a living. Plenty of my clients said, Sam, I do drugs because why should I work for Burger King, and earn, whatever, $75 a day when I can make $500 a day selling drugs? I gotta support my mother. I gotta support my family. Unfortunately, I'm not gonna mention names or cities or places, but sometimes it's a family thing. It's not just an individual thing. In certain parts, of the state, the grandmother's involved. They send out their, grandkids to go out and sell drugs and bring home the bacon. In certain parts of, certain towns and cities. And unfortunately, the kids, they grow up with that mentality, and they become desensitized to the impact of drugs and to the violence that is produced by these drugs. Because it's being validated not just by their peers, but by their authority figures. Sometimes there are parents that reward kids with pot. I had a client that said, the reason why I'm doing heroin now because when I was 12, my father used to give me pot just to reward me. Just to put me to sleep. I mean, when he was at 5 or 6, just to put him to sleep. So it's a lifestyle. It's not just a coincidence. It's not just an accident. Working in New Haven, work with hardcore addicts. And they never woke up one day and say, I'm going to do drugs. Our hardcore addicts, it's somebody that has experienced some kind of post-traumatic stress disorder when they were a kid. And somehow they weren't able, to express themselves or to show how they were feeling. And the only way to show how they were feeling is through doing drugs, because drugs allows the person to do the things that are not permitted. It makes them do wild things. It rewards them. Prescription drugs are replacing traditional narcotic drugs. And this is not a problem that we found in the inner city. It's a problem we find right here. Unfortunately, it's a problem that we find right here, even in Madison, Clinton, Guilford, Old Saybrook. If anything, the major supporter of drugs in the inner city come from the suburbs. Yeah, I've seen cars in New Haven that I say, why? It had no place. Cars that are out of place. People that I can tell that have no business being here. You got no business parking your car there. People get addicted to drugs not just because of PTSD. They get addicted to drugs obviously because they have maybe a car accident, through pain. And prescription drugs, obviously, it's the same thing as heroin. Oxycontin, Xanax, Benson, benzos, Vicodin, and a bunch of other pills. They're heroin. They're opiates. They're just processed in a way that people can just take it, in a pill instead of a bag. I mean, instead of buying it on the street, you get it from the doctor. Unfortunately, people die more of prescription drug abuse than they do of heroin on the streets. Why? Because they feel that because it's being prescribed by the doctor, it's safe to use. And the majority of people that die because of drugs are, prescription drugs. And the percentage of people that have OD from prescription drug has increased to almost 400. And especially among women. Women have the highest rate of OD, which is overdose, than men. Now, some say that it's because men don't like to report a lot of their addiction or their problems, and women tend to be more expressive, But females have a more tendency to abuse prescription drugs than men, because obviously prescription drugs don't have a stigma. It's like you don't have to go to the street leader down the street, to get prescription drugs. You can get it to the, over the counter, not over the counter, but pharmacist, medicine cabinet, a friend, a family member, the father's, Vicodin, or mother's, Percocet. It's right on the shelf. So there's no stigma to it. And unfortunately, people are seeing prescription drugs OxyContin is like king when it comes to drug addiction, as they're pretty much their savior. You know, it's opiates, it's heroin. It's no different than meth. It has the same effect. You know, I've had clients that females that families, good jobs, good income, calling me saying, you know, that's to work in a methadone clinic, saying that they need methadone because they're hooked on OxyContin. Had a car accident. Now these are people that were well off. I had a NHL hockey player come in. He was hooked on OxyContin because of the pain of an injury. The man was spending, and this is what he told me, in line, he was spending about $20,000 a month on drugs, just to feel normal. Because that's another thing. You know, see, once people start using narcotics to cure pain, it at some point the pain is cured. You know, the injury, it's not there. They're healed. But the problem is that because they're using opiates, they create what they call tolerance to the drug. And the term tolerance means that the body becomes somewhat attached to the drug, can't function normal. All of a sudden, the pain is gone, the fracturing is healed, but now you got withdrawals. And the mind of the intellectual person saying, this drug is killing me, I need to stop, but the body's saying, oh, you got to have it because that's the only way I'm going to feel normal. Now they go into withdrawals with them. They got stomach ache, diarrhea, constipation, dizziness, and they don't feel normal. Just to live just a very simple life. So their basic life skills get suppressed. You gotta be very careful. You know, it's just not prescription drugs. I don't even know why they came up with the idea that you know, this was just the way to go to cure pain. I mean, I do have to admit, I mean, OxyContin was first created to help people that were struggling, that had cancer. And because what it does, it diverts the attention away from pain. You know, opiates have a way to bypass, you know, the messages thank you, honey, that come to the central nervous system, tends to bypass them. So if the body's in pain, the messages that are coming through the central nervous system, the opiate, what it's doing is blocking it. And now the opiate is creating an euphoria. It's creating pleasure instead. It's creating somewhat of a delusion. So that's what opiate does. In somebody who's struggling with cancer, it's a right fit. But unfortunately, these pharmaceutical companies are there to make a profit too. And they basically let the cat out of the bag. They opened up Pandora's box. You know, and now they can't get it back inside again. It's all over. I mean, and the reason why prescription drugs have become the new drug and is replacing traditional drugs is because it's so easily available. I mean, they even got pharmacies on the internet that anybody can order without prescription. They're so easily available that this is a serious problem. About 60% of our teenagers are abusing drugs. Probably about 30 to 40% of adults are abusing drugs. You know, and this is impacting, you know, our economy as well because it's impacting, you know, places of work. You know, people are struggling with their addiction, now they can't work. They're getting laid off. There's a lot of accidental injuries. 60% of accidents that happens at work has to do with drugs. Work compensation. dexterity, ability to make, rational decisions. I mean, somebody's driving a pitchfork and doesn't know how to, it can't discern, the logic, and there you go. So a lot of accidents, a lot of layoff. And it's over the billions of dollars, $80 billion that is being spent on trying to treat this issue. Our teenagers, about 60% of them are doing drugs. And I mean, it's getting to the point where even some parents are saying, just let it be. And I'm not blaming the parents, because I know that parents, maybe 3 or 4% of parents don't care, but it's getting to the point where it's just becoming an epidemic. College students, especially the one that live in fraternity houses, they are the ones that are kind of, high, they like the high intensity feeling, the one that like to take risk all the time. You know how young boys are, full of energies, and the testosterone is just kind of going. I mean, those are the individuals that are most at risk of abusing prescription drugs. A lot of college students are using prescription drugs because they say it helps them study better. It helps them cope with their stress, of trying to get the grades. It helps them sleep better. It helps them cope with relationships. So it's also an epidemic in our schools, unfortunately. Again, you're not going to see somebody, with a hood, going to these schools, with a mask or something like that, trying to sell drugs to these, college and graduate students. It's coming from, the doctors. And even doctors, they get rewarded for selling so many prescription drugs and narcotics. These pharmaceutical companies are rewarding even these doctors. They say, you got to sell so many pills. And then they give them all kinds of trips, to go to and whatnot. So, why did I write the book? I wrote the book because I just didn't feel that the social factor and the spiritual factor are not being addressed enough. I mean, there's literature out there, there's books out there that talk about, the social factors and the cultural factor, which in my opinion, I think that they're a little confusing, to the average person who just, doesn't understand what, sociology and how the whole social system works. And I could be wrong. I doesn't mean that I'm right. The same thing with spirituality. I didn't feel that it was being addressed deep enough or detailed enough. I mean, the 12-step program talks about the higher power, which it transcends into the spiritual world. It talks about the body, mind, soul, body, mind, and spirit, which is a comprehensive look at rehabilitation. We can't just look at cognitive behavioral therapy, or just rational behavioral therapy. We also have to look at the spirit side as well. Most of the treatments programs out there, they treat both the biological and the cognitive skills, which are being hindered by the euphoria, the hallucination, the delusions of the drugs. It hinders and suppresses the cognitive skills. And even doctors and professionals are, can cope with abstract issues, when they're on drugs. I mean, like I say, you can have a CEO from a company start using Percocet or Xanax or OxyContin, and before you know it, they lost their job, they're on the streets. Somebody who's abusing drugs can't think in abstract terms. Can't think about tomorrow. Tomorrow, it's a mental concept that you've got to use your imagination a lot. The only thing they can focus is like right here, right now. What I got to do in the next 5 minutes. You know, and most of the time they're thinking what I got to do to get my next high. So it's very difficult to think in abstract terms. But I guess what I'm saying is that, you know, I wrote this book because I felt that, you know, spirituality plays a major role in recovery, you know, and so see the social factors that need to be addressed. Because drug addiction is not just an independent problem. It's not an independent problem. It's not just the kid next door or just people in that city, or it isn't. It's an environmental problem, it's a social problem. You and I are involved in this issue, believe it or not, whether we like it or not. Some people are the cause of the problems, and other people are they're the cause of the solution. And I'm saying here that no, we're not with the problem, but I try to address these social issues, the way we think, a new lifestyle, you know, how we raise our kids, moral values, ethics, you know, the Protestant Christian culture and influence that has kind of designed and have created this country, you know, is eroding. You know, it's ever since the counterculture revolution of the '60s, the Protestant ethics, you know, has pretty much been attacked, and it's just the way, it's the new morality that is creating this kind of free thinking of, I'm not responsible for someone else, I'm just responsible for myself, so let me just do in my life whatever I want. There's just this kind of, more of an exaggeration of individuality. You know, where, for example, yeah, people say, oh, as long as I'm smoking or drinking or using in my room and not on the street, I'm fine. It's still a social problem because at some point you gotta get out of your house. Somehow that addiction has to be supported by something. And the higher the narcotics, the more serious the crime becomes. The higher the narcotics, so opiates, cocaine, meth, the more serious become. They're crimes, they're predatory crimes, the higher the narcotics. For example, somebody who's smoking pot is probably not going to try to assault somebody to get high. Somebody who's doing opiates or heroin, which is the final product of opiates, by the way, is probably going to assault somebody, maybe kill somebody, because it has such a high potent, you know, that, again, the body can't function unless it has it. So the more serious the crime become based on the drug that they're using. It's a serious problem, you know. But when I don't care about boundaries, when I don't care about you, when I don't care about you, when I don't care about you, yeah, I'm going to go out there and do drugs. It's all about me. Because again, you know, drugs rewards the things that are shameful. It rewards them. It gives permission to people to do the things that are prohibited. I have a lot of beautiful women, oh my God, young, beautiful women, you know, and mature women too, beautiful. just hooked up on drugs, you know, and just walking around with sometimes with two guys right next to them, you know, just to support their habit. You know, and it just breaks my heart. You know, because from the outside, sometimes they look so both, you know, like the ideal American women, you know, but destroyed inside. I mean, a lot of women get hooked on drugs, a lot to do with relationships. Most of the time, it was the boyfriend who got them hooked on drugs. And they just wanted to love the boyfriend, so they did the drugs to love the husband, the boyfriend, so the boyfriend won't leave them. I mean, statistics also show that females abuse drugs, opiates, because they feel oppressed by society. You know, and I use 3 different sociological theories to describe the social factors that impact addiction. You know, and I mean, there are many sociological theories out there, but I thought that the one that made the most common sense were the structure functional theory, the conflict theory, symbolic theory. Without me going into deep explanation of what these means, is that, you know, the structural functional theory, which is originated by M.L. Durkheim, he believed that society runs and is managed, and the power comes from on top by institutions. The institutions are the ones that create, change, monitor, manage society. And it is these large institutions that actually is what changed the conscience and mold the conscience of the people. For example, government, our economic system, our educational system, religious system, the culture system, the media. You know, if these institutions break down and they're not using enough power and authority, then it creates somewhat what they call anomie, which is chaos. So because of these institutions are breaking down, individuals are breaking down. So you fix these institutions and the individual doesn't do drugs. Is there truth in that? There's some truth in that. I mean, for example, the Bush administration, the last, W. Bush, he promised so much to do against drugs, and he barely did anything. So now all these drugs are coming from South America because there was no one there to prevent them from coming. You know, South America is just a product of these world markets that are not being, that are kind of hindering that continent from moving forward. So a banana grower, a farmer who's growing bananas, you know, is going to say, well, if I can sell a kilo of cocaine for $2,000, why am I growing bananas and selling them for, you know, $10 a bunch of bananas? No. So, and especially there's a higher demand. You know, United States is the country that consumes most of the drugs in the world. United States is obsessed with drugs. It's unbelievable. There are drugs coming from the south, there are drugs coming from the east, there's drugs coming from the west. Drugs coming from Afghanistan, which is opiates. Drugs coming from China. Drugs coming from the south. You know, why? Because these institutions are breaking down. The family institution is breaking down. So there's chaos there. There's no guidance. Just face it. You know, our government institution, let's just get a government shut down. Our economic institution, you know, we just can't make ends meet. So survival time. You know, our churches, I'm a minister, by the way, but people are not just taking seriously moral instructions. Churches get out there preaching the word or preaching the gospel or teaching moral instructions. People don't care. They just don't care. So what? You know. So these institutions are not functioning well. So the individual down here is having a meltdown. That's one theory. The second theory is conflict theory, which is pretty much originated by Karl Marx. And this is a theory that talks about different groups that are fighting against each other for authority, power, and control. And this means it could be political. You know, Democrats versus Republican. This could be gender wars. This can be sexual wars. This could be class wars. So getting back to, you know, what I was saying about females, this is a theory that pretty much fits, you know, most of the females that use drugs, because they're fighting against what they feel that is an exploitive society against females. You know, so they kind of feel oppressed by somewhat society. You know, like the jobs, and all these other restrictions that they may feel. So they turn to drugs because that's the only way that is going to give them the euphoria, the pleasure, and the things that they're trying to attain. And a lot of the females that I kind of helped, they came from that background. Either they were abused by their father, and some of them were abused by their mother, by the way. I had a female who said, my mother sexually abused me. A few of them. You know, they felt oppressed in terms of economics. They felt oppressed because they had a bad relationship. They kind of felt overly controlled. You know, so opiates was just an escape. So there's a lot of literature written about that. I'm just, you know, again, I'm quoting a lot of statistics. But conflict theories says that, look, it says that people use drugs or sell drugs to A, get their independence, survival, economic, maintain power, maintain control. You know, unfortunately, a lot of these individuals that live in the city, one of the things that they argue is that they're trying to get rid of drugs because they don't want us to be independent, or they don't want us to have power. They don't want us to have control over ourselves. And drugs is creating an economy in our neighborhoods and is giving us money and independence. You know, that's one of the theories that I kind of elaborate in the book. You know, in reality, I mean, I can't say that they're not too far from the truth. Because in the inner city, you know, when the manufacturer industry left the inner city, it left a void. What time am I supposed to quit?
10 more minutes.
10 more minutes?
5.
Okay.
Yeah.
5 more minutes? Okay. It left a void where there are no jobs. So drugs is their economy. And a lot of these depressed states, like we were talking about West Virginia, the Midwest. The Midwest their drug is meth. That's where meth originated. And that's one of the reasons why meth has taken somewhat of a prominent role, you know, in the economic structure of that place. And a lot of them are saying because there are no jobs. I just heard women a woman, I think it was on TV, a couple days ago, that said that the reason why she sold drugs is because there were no jobs. She made over $20,000, in a couple of weeks on the Midwest. And another reason why meth has taken such a big role in, it's kind of gaining speed, because they're getting tough right now on the border. Where now they're sending all these, the army, and they got all this technology that prevents, drugs from coming across. So people, again, we're addicted to pleasure. So they can't get the natural stuff from South America or from the East, so they have to create their own drugs. And it's so cheap to make it. Anybody can make it. And then it doesn't cost much. People can make it in the basement. Just go to the pharmacy, pick up a couple ingredients, bake it, cook it, and they're done. And they're making a lot of money. The other theory that I used was the symbolic interaction theory, which is the individual who makes the choice. It's not the institution, it's not these powerful groups that make the choices, it's just how the individual feels. They have the power to make their own choices. They somewhat, they try to impress others, by doing certain things, by doing drugs. Makes them feel like they're tough, their individuality. It makes them feel that they are independent, so on and so forth. Again, before I finish, just 5 more minutes, I do want to finish with Christ, because I think that's an important part of this book. And 5 more minutes. The reason why I put religion in here, and I have a lot of respect for religion. It doesn't matter what religion it is. It could be Muslim, Catholic, Buddhist, you name it. I think they're all trying to do good in society. I think that they're trying to create this moral order, that is essential for the survival of our, species. I chose Christ because the nature of Christ is that it's not a religion, it's a relationship that we have. Well, I'm a Christian, so it's a relationship that I have with Christ. To me, it's not a religion. It's not an external thing. It's not just faith in something that I can't see, feel, touch. Touch, I can't touch. But it is a relationship, and the majority of individuals that have struggles with addiction, a high percentage of it is because of some kind of relationship. And the turnout rate of individuals that use faith as a way to recovery is very high. Very high. It's almost like 80%. Versus 60% where there's not religion involved, or where there's just not specifically Christ. And I'm saying this because I work and I've seen individuals that have gone through Teen Challenge, and they have this Christ-centered therapy. We want to model someone. That's what we want to do. And we all want to be somebody who's bigger, stronger than us. We always want to model that. This is why, I feel sorry for people that are kind of sport fanatics, because they're trying to idolize these athletes that are using drugs, and they're going to be using drugs. But when we use Christ as our model, he's the ideal human. It's all about love. It's all about unity. It's all about self-control. It's about awareness. It's about security. It's about assurance. It's about stability. It's about knowing that although we don't know what it's going to happen tomorrow, but we know who's going to hold tomorrow. And that's, I can stand here for another 2 hours explaining this topic to you, but I do want to appreciate, your opportunity to you've given me to express, my thoughts, about why I wrote the book. And I encourage you to get a copy. It's really going to help, especially those that are not too familiar with this topic, give you a run through a lot of the issues and problems that people struggle with. I mean, I talk about the biological, the mental, the cultural, the social, the spiritual, and statistics. So that's it, folks.